Good afternoon or good evening, depending in the world, where in the world you might happen to be at this point in time. My name is Mark Johnston, and the conference organisers have very kindly asked me to say just a few words about myself, the work I'm involved in, and some of the challenges facing the churches here in the UK at this present time. Currently, I'm the minister of Bethel Presbyterian Church in Cardiff, in Wales, in the UK. We're a medium-sized congregation, but we're made up of a very diverse mix of people from different walks of life and different parts of the world. And it's a pleasure to be their pastor. And they never cease to be a source of huge encouragement to me and to my family. Originally, I'm from Northern Ireland, and I trained for the ministry in Westminster Seminary in Philadelphia back in the 1980s. And when I got back to Ireland in 1984, I was asked to plant a church near the cathedral city of Armagh in Northern Ireland, about 35 miles west of Belfast. This was a huge challenge, and we ended up starting with just one other family as we got the church underway. But in His goodness, God blessed that work over the space of the 10 years we were there, and it grew and it flourished before we eventually moved on. In 1994, I was called to be the pastor of Grove Chapel in Camberwell, southeast London. Very different from what we'd known in Ireland, in that this was an old and historic church with 200 years of history behind it, almost a succession of men who'd served it faithfully and well in that time. But it was located also in a very cosmopolitan and secular community. We spent 16 years there in the end, and during that time we learned a great deal about life generally, but especially about ministry in the kind of world we live in today. In 2010, I was called to Proclamation Presbyterian Church, which is a PCA congregation in the western suburbs of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. And in many ways, that proved to be the biggest challenge of my ministry so far. But it also proved to be a very joyful challenge. Our time there turned out to be cut short for reasons that nobody could have expected. But during that brief time that we spent in the US, God did a very special work in proclamation, and it was a real privilege to be part of it. And the bonds of friendship and fellowship that we forged with people there have endured ever since. Having served on both sides of the Atlantic and indeed on both sides of the Irish Sea, I'm very conscious of just how great are the challenges facing churches here in the UK at this present time, especially those that hold to Reformed convictions. Even though Britain was the cradle of the Reformation in the English-speaking world, for many years the Reformed faith went into sharp decline and almost became extinct. All this began to change in the late 1940s, early 1950s, with the influence of men like Jim Packer and Martin Lloyd-Jones and their ministry and their teaching. But it gathered momentum in the late 50s, early 1960s, when the Banner of Truth Trust was founded under the influence of Ian Murray and others who had shared the vision with him to rediscover the Reformed faith and to promote it afresh in churches throughout our land. It's been my privilege to serve as one of the trustees of Banner of Truth for almost 25 years. And it's just thrilling to see the growing appetite for Reformed books and literature that we publish, but also to attend the Reformed conferences that we organise, not just here in the UK, but in the US and in Australia also. It's also a wonderful joy to see the growing number of younger ministers here in the UK who are just eager to push forward with a vision for planting churches in our land, churches that are reformed in their vision, churches that love the truths of the Reformation, but also have a deep passion for the kind of worship that came out of the Reformation, deep and rich and reverent. But they also have a great desire to get the gospel out to a nation that has lost its spiritual moorings and desperately needs the good news of the Lord Jesus Christ and his salvation. Please pray for the work in our churches here in the UK throughout our land, and that God may pour out his Spirit in ways that haven't been seen for many a generation, and that God himself would be seen to be on the move in a time when we need him more than ever before.